Officer, and I call the meeting of Wednesday, October 5th to order. Today we have 2 items on the agenda, and I haven't received any requests for changes to the agenda, so we'll hear them in the order that they appear. I also don't have any announcements and appeals, so the next thing on the agenda is comments from members of the public on items not on our agenda today. Is there anyone who would like to address the staff hearing officer? No, seeing no one, we'll go to the first project, which is 2521 Medcliff Road, if the applicant would like to come up. Good morning. Anytime you're ready.
Yeah. Dan Gullett, Associate Planner. This project is located at 2521 Medcliff Road. The parcel is 8,719 square feet. It's at the corner of Medcliff Road and La Jolla Circle, and zoned E3 and SD3. The complete project is abatement of an existing enforcement case associated with as-built fencing along the property, along both La Jolla Circle and Medcliff Road. There was a low fence that was constructed along Medcliff and a higher fence along La Jolla Circle that returns to the house. Much of this fencing is actually within the public right-of-way. This dash line shows the property line, and this is where the existing low fence is in the front, and then the high fence along La Jolla Circle, which is 6 feet and higher. So Public Works actually granted an encroachment permit for some fencing within the right-of-way. The encroachment permit requires this low fence that rounds the corner to be moved further toward the house to provide a 6-foot clear path along Medcliff. And the encroachment permit also includes the higher fence along La Jolla Circle that could remain there. So what's needed to complete the encroachment permit is actually a Public Works permit for construction of the fence to verify that it was constructed properly, and for the new fence along Medcliff. And design review is also required for these fences by a single-family design board. What's before the staff hearing officer today is this section of fence that's on the private property. It's this 15-foot section, and it includes this gate. So the fence panels are 6 feet, and the posts are slightly higher, and the gate is also higher than the
and that makes every passerby, as you may know, it's a busy street just with the Douglas Preserve at the end of the road, and so there's literally hundreds of people that are walking by, and to keep our privacy, that barrier, if you will, is important. I'm happy to move the fence back to increase the space for passersby. That's expensive, obviously, but something that I realize that is part of the plan. I'm happy to do it. The lighting issue is I believe very minor, but when we were told that neighbors objected to the lights, which were 40-watt candle lights, we removed them, so they're no longer operative. So now there's no lights. So that's not exactly what we had in mind, but hopefully we'll get something that I think meets the guidelines, that doesn't broadcast light out left and right, but only downward. So we can put new, after we move the fence and get things set, we can put appropriate light covers on to make sure that happens. And our goal has been to be able to finish our landscaping and put the lawn and some plants in so that it'll look complete, and that's what we're trying to accomplish.
Okay, great, thank you. I'd like to open the public hearing. I have one request to speak from David Van Hoy. If you'd like to come up and you can use the mic.
David?
I'm here really just to talk about neighborhood impacts. We live catty corner and then one house in from there on the inland part of La Jolla Drive. And one of the things that wasn't mentioned in the introduction was the loss of some significant landscaping. In the oval there, you'll see an aerial photograph from prior to the remodeling where, yes, there was a lot of sort of scrub, if you will, and so forth, and low-lying, but there were some significant trees along that side of the property as well, and you can see from the lower photograph that that's been just completely denuded, and I think it would be important to understand what sort of landscaping is going to be replacing that. If we're going to, the neighborhood loses, by keeping that tall fence, and the fence is actually, I'm sort of the yardstick. I think there's two of them there. I'm 6 feet tall, and the fence is 6 feet tall, but then there's another, foot or 16 inches on top of that in terms of the actual as-built fence. So if we're going to, as a neighborhood, going to be, if that fence is going to encroach into the public property, then I think the landscaping for that side of the street is really, really important. That neighborhood is very mature. It's a 1959 and 1960s vintage tract, and there's some substantial trees in almost every property. So that's one comment I would have. Transportation can weigh in. I can appreciate the Caesar's need for privacy on that corner. It is a busy corner, pedestrian-wise, and if they're okay with the sight lines, the fence does preclude the what are there, 5 houses I think on the cul-de-sac there that need to be really careful for pedestrians and dogs and cars. The sight lines across that corner are not great coming out, and if none of them are here today, then that's probably not a problem with those neighbors. And probably most importantly, and it sounds like the explanation that staff is proposing is going to deal with this one. This is the new sidewalk that's been poured along the beach side of Medcliff, and it goes along, and you can see, if I may reach, here's the new sidewalk, and you can see if the sidewalk were to continue, and then it continues across the corner and then goes almost all the way to the Douglas Family Preserve, which is 1 block over. The as-built development precludes a sidewalk from going along there, and that sidewalk has been there for I think a month or two now, and it's being heavily used. People previously walked in the street, which happens on most of the Mesa, but everybody's really using that sidewalk. So I think the idea, I didn't hear specifically in your explanation that the fence, seems to me if the low fence in the front is going to be pulled back, it should be pulled back to be on the property, not just squeeze in enough room to sort of shoehorn in a 6-foot fence, or excuse me, a 6-foot sidewalk with no landscaping. If it's going to come out and be rebuilt the way the rest of us have to rebuild or build everything, it seems to me it should be on the property line or on the site. So because that is heavily traveled and there's nice landscaping that's been planted along the adjacent, there's a large, five lot project that starts immediately east of this property that's been just recently redone and landscaped and fenced properly and so forth. So that continuum, that connection to the Douglas Family Preserve through the neighborhood to La Mesa Park is heavily traveled and really important for it to be safe and I think nice looking. So those are my comments.
Okay, great, thank you.
A couple of things, if I may.
Just a minute.
Oh,
We're
sorry.
still in the public hearing part. Is there anybody else who would like to address the staff hearing officer on this project? No? We did receive a couple of letters from, one was from Ms. Paula Westbury, who routinely managers all of our agendas, and expressing concerns with it. And then another one from Vernon, a neighbor on La Jolla Drive, also expressing concerns with the fence in terms of the actual height and the fact that the previous height says was 42 inches and now it's up higher. And then also removal of trees. So those are the two public hearing or letters I received. So I'll close the public hearing. If you'd like to.
Well, I just want to show Mr. Van Hoy made a comment which I have to rebut a little bit here, in that this additional portion of the fence doesn't add on top of 6 feet. This is a tape measure I filmed, and you can see that the 6-foot mark includes the area of that filigree on top of the fence.
Well, I think what he's alluding to is if you see your property, we measure it from the lowest point of contact, which would be on the outside of the fence, and your property looks to slope down.
It does.
Slightly.
Yeah, it does.
So this is up near your house, up here, and it's on top of the concrete that was poured for the post. So I think it's just a matter of where you measure it from.
Yeah, well,
what the height
admittedly,
is.
but I just making the comment that at least at some locations, obviously, it's not. That's all.
Ms. Reardon, could I comment on the tree removal?
Sure.
So the municipal code requires Parks and Recreation approval of trees greater than 4 inches in diameter at chest height within the public right-of-way and within the front setback area. And in this case, it would be 20 feet back from the property line. So there is an open enforcement case that Parks and Recreation will be investigating regarding vegetation removal on this property. So we don't know right now really what was removed, what actually qualified as one of those protected trees, but that is something that the city is looking into right now.
Okay, great, thank you. My purview, as Dan said at the beginning, is as this portion of the fence that's on the private property. I don't have purview on encroachment permits and things in the public right-of-way, and I understand the neighborhood's concerns. I've read the staff report, and I've noticed that there's an encroachment permit in here, and I'm not quite sure why it was actually recorded and granted beforehand. Before you received your approvals, because you still need to get single-family design approval, and they may or may not approve it in this location. And then you also need the modification for this part. And I know that the encroachment permit, like I don't have purview over things in the public right-of-way. They don't have purview in regards to the fence height on private property. But there's still some other approvals that need to be granted. And looking at the information in the staff report, the Single Family Design Board has concerns regarding the location of the fence, and they stated they prefer it to be located out of the public right-of-way. So those items are being looked at right now, and I don't know, Mr. Van Hoy, if you went to the consent calendar of the Single Family Design Board and expressed your concerns, but they do need to follow up with that with that approval. Given that, the part of the fence that's in my purview, I'm fine with. It hooks up with the existing fence, and I understand your need for privacy, and I believe I would be supportive of a fence on the front property line, but that's not what you're requesting right now. So in regards to my approval, I can support the fence. This says 8 foot. It's 6 foot high.
Yeah,
But for
that's
8
correct.
feet
Yeah, that was just that 8
length.
foot.
Okay,
Yeah, that's
just
not
want to make sure. I can approve the part of the zoning modification under my purview with the condition that staff's recommending regarding the lighting, but I also would add 2 additional conditions. One, that prior to the issuance of the building permit for this fence, that the enforcement case for the trees, which it says ENF 2011-00675 regarding, it's alleged that there was 3 trees. It'll be investigated that needs to be cleared up prior to the issuance of the building permit. And then I would like Public Works to look at the encroachment permit and reconsider it given the issues that have arose. And I realize the issuance of an encroachment permit does not grant you any authority to construct that. You still need to go through and get design review and the construction permits. But I think in this case it was issued prematurely without all the information out on the table in regards to the tree with design review and what have you. So, but in regards to this portion of the fence, I approve your project with those 3 conditions.
Thank you. I'm a little confused. If the encroachment permit was granted and filed, which it has been, what is there within the encroached area that is of concern then? Just
the design review aspects and the impacts on the neighborhood. This is a public area. It's part of the public viewscape, and what is the associated impacts with it in regards, in this case, it's design review. Transportation staff has looked at it, and as stated in the staff report and as part of the record, they don't believe it causes a safety impact, so that's another issue that's looked at. So there's a whole bunch of different issues that are looked at in terms of the encroachment permit.
So, aside from the landscaping, or the tree, bush, whatever, removal, is your approval and the filing of the encroachment permit leaving intact the fence in its location and height, or is that whole issue?
My approval is only for this. The encroachment permit sets out parameters for it, and it does say in the encroachment permit, under the conditions, that all required fees shall be paid and all required approvals and permits obtained prior to any construction work. Well, in this case, it's actually already as-built, but you need to get a permit. So all required approvals would include Single Family Design Board.
Okay.
So they can decide to deny it, or they can say, you know what, we really feel strongly it needs to be moved back, and the fact that this is granted does not give you any additional rights to construct it here. It doesn't supersede design review's approval. I think the part that's confusing to you, and I think confusing just to the public, is that this was recorded before it went through the whole process, and it should have taken everything into account. Because whether or not this was recorded, you still need design review approval, which is Single Family Design Board in this case.
So, Single Family Design Board is the next step.
Yes.
And that's, okay. And then can I remove back to I have a question relative to the space here. In the front, we had proposed to move back the fence to the rear of the little stone pillars that were erected. And that, I thought, brought us, extremely close to the property line here. And so if the desire is that we remove these as well and take it all the way back to the property line is part of...
No, my understanding of the Single-Family Design Board's concern was just along the La Jolla Circle frontage. That this Public Works had looked at that and that there was adequate room for the sidewalk.
Okay.
My concern's on this street frontage.
And, okay, a worst-case scenario, irrespective of the Parks and Recreation issue regarding the landscape, worst-case scenario is what on that side?
That this would need to be pushed back to the property line. Well, you would need another modification for that. You would need a modification, so you would, I guess there's two options. One, I have approved this fence. The other one is that I can continue you until after the Single-Family Design Board, and if they wish to pull it back, it's noticed such that it would encompass a fence on the property line. Because it says it's to allow a fence to exceed 3.5 feet in height within 10 feet of the front lot line and within 50 feet of the street corner.
So we're back to square one, basically. If you observe the 50-foot line, all of that fence along La Jolla back to wherever the 50-foot line intersects with, as it's drawn across the property.
No, it would be, 50 foot. But, you've requested a mod, and it only applies to this part because this is the only part on private property. The way this is written, that if this was proposed to be moved back, it could be covered under the same project, but that's not what's proposed right now. And since we don't know what Single-Family Design Board is going to do, it'd be premature for you to move it back. So what I was saying is that, what I took the action on is to approve this portion of the fence. The other option would be, you have my support of this portion of the fence to ask for a continuance, go back to Single-Family Design Board, and if they approve it here, you come back and this is just, I'll approve this, or come back and change it to along the fence line. The benefit would be that if you needed to come, if I approved this, you went back, you needed to move it, you have to pay another fee for the fence modification. If I just continued it, it would be under the same application.
Yeah, well, I obviously I think I'd like to just continue it on that basis. I'm not sure what I need to file, if anything, to accomplish that.
When you say continue it on that basis, what do you mean? Just go with your approval and just keep going down the process, or just continue this item?
I'm sorry, I'm confused again.
That's fine.
If I ask for, yes, just a continuance so that I don't have to refile again, I think that's what I would like to do. But
okay.
Am I precluded? Does that preclude the Single-Family Design from making their decision on it?
No, then they would give comments again they'd give comments back to me. Or they could take an approval contingent on the approval of the modification. They can do two things. One, they can just do comments to me saying it's supportable. Or I've seen in minor projects that they approve it contingent on the modification being approved.
Okay, so at this point, am I free to move the fence and comply with the...
I would wait until you get design review approval.
Okay.
Wait to implement anything until you get your approvals.
And with regard to this fence, we don't know what location would be acceptable to Single-Family Design Board. They did indicate that they would like it on the property line, but what matters here is what side of the property line it's on. They could say push it back up against the property line, but if it's still in the public right-of-way, then it doesn't need a modification.
Then it does not?
Correct.
If it's just on the outside of the public right of property line, so on this side, that would still be an encroachment permit. If they want it just on this side, then it would be a modification because it's private property there. If it's right on the property line, that's a modification.
Yeah, well, it's not, admittedly. I mean, I built it in the same location that the former fence was for 40 years, but you know, I just didn't assume that there was going to be an issue. So I built it in the same location that it existed previously, but obviously then the former fence always was in the public right-of-way. So I thought that by obtaining an encroachment permit and filing and securing that eliminated at least that from as being an issue, but that's still open because of what you just read to me off of that. Is that correct?
Yeah, that you need to get the required approvals. It just gives you, and we want to know that it's supportable. You know, design review would want to know that it's supportable by Public Works because they don't want to be reviewing something and improving something that they can't even support. So it's kind of like the chicken and the egg, which comes first. So I think that the good thing is to get it to a point that's almost ready to be recorded and then go through so then everybody knows it's okay. So what I'll do is I'll rescind my approval of the modification and continue it to November, what was it, for a month, because we don't have a meeting on the 19th. All right. What is this, October? So what would be the date, Kathy?
For single-family design board or for ours?
For the next show.
November
That
2nd.
would be November 2nd.
Okay, so I'll continue it to November 2nd. And the same notice would apply. And again, I'll iterate, I'm supportive of the modification that this continuance is to allow you to go to the single-family design board for further review and input on the fence on La Jolla Circle street frontage.
Okay, and then the Parks and Recreation issue.
I will put that as a condition, so that doesn't need to be cleaned up before my action. That be follow-up after the hearing.
Okay, but I mean, essentially, they're going to review the photos of the fact that there was some.
Well, this part of it, actually, you can work with Dan afterwards and figure out the next steps on that.
Okay.
Okay, so then I'll continue this to November 2nd, and we'll see you then.
Okay.
Okay.
You want to keep that?
Yeah,
or
I'll have Dan keep these.
Okay.
Great, thank you.
All right. Thank you.
The next item is 422 Samarkand. Whoa. A rocky chair. I almost lost you.
Nothing new. I live on the edge.
Yeah. Anytime you're ready.
So this project is located at 422 Samarkand. This lot is 11,248